Let's step into this cold, rainy evening together outside the city's finest restaurant. A woman in a wheelchair rests alone, bathed in the doorway's warm amber glow. Not because she lacks money, and certainly not because she forgot to book ahead, but because someone judged her appearance and decided she ruined their perfect image. The waiting crowd simply watches, nobody steps up. Then a lone father, his little girl's hand gripping his fingers, breaks the silence. He does not raise his voice, he never argues. He asks just one simple question, silencing the entire courtyard. 5 minutes pass and the manager's face goes completely pale. 10 minutes later, her hidden truth changes absolutely everything. If you believe human decency still matters when true identity is hidden, stay with me. This will leave us breathless. The drizzle that night felt uncertain, never quite deciding what it was supposed to be. Too light to make anyone run for shelter, yet far too stubborn to ignore. Moisture clung to the brass sign hanging above the entrance of Hargrove and Pine. An establishment spending 11 years building a reputation on fine dining and carefully judged exclusivity. The canopy out front was forest green, trimmed perfectly with gold. 2 sculpted trees guarded those glass doors like ancient sentries. Inside, the ambient lighting felt warm and low, that flattering amber glow making every single patron look like they carried some wealthy secret. Charlotte Vance had dined at Hargrove and Pine exactly one time 3 long years ago. Attending as a quiet observer, hiding the fact that she actually owned the entire building's lease. She kept her true status hidden then. She had absolutely no plans to reveal her identity tonight. Wearing a plain navy coat and gray blouse, she pulled her hair back without fuss. Her simple wheelchair offered no visual clues about her massive hidden wealth. Nothing demanding any special attention. 14 months post-accident taught her a harsh truth about human nature. People show their truest colors when interacting with someone whose real value remains hidden. Arriving at 7:43, she rested quietly beneath that grand sheltering canopy. Sheltered from the rain, she peered through the thick glass into the bustling dining area. Crisp tablecloths, soft candlelight. Glowing liquor bottles lined the elegant bar. She noticed several empty tables waiting inside. Calling ahead at 4 o'clock, she easily secured her dinner reservation under the name C. Vance. A single diner for 8 o'clock. Arriving early, she felt perfectly content waiting outside. What happened next exposed their true underlying character. Madison Reed served as the front-of-house host tonight. Spotting Charlotte outside, Madison plastered on a hollow, practiced smile before pulling the heavy door open. 25 years old and dressed flawlessly. She carried the rigid energy of someone desperate to uphold the restaurant's superficial standards. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" Charlotte politely confirmed she did. A heavy, judging pause stretched far too long. "I'm so sorry," Madison lied, using a tone meant to sound polite but completely shutting her out. "I'm afraid we're fully booked tonight." Charlotte stared right past her. An elegantly dressed couple strolled inside without facing any resistance. Welcomed warmly and seated immediately at a window table. Just moments later, another couple arrived, greeted with that same unquestioning respect. A bright smile, a quick check of the tablet, welcomed right inside. She looked up at Madison and stated simply, "You have a table reserved under Vance." Madison's polite mask never slipped. "I am sorry for the mix-up. Maybe another night." Then she turned her back, returning to her podium. Charlotte never shouted, never made a scene. She just sat exactly where she was, waiting in the pouring rain. Then Jason Miller strolled out from the back of that upscale lobby, showing the practiced smoothness of a man used to erasing problems before anyone noticed them. 40 years old, heavily built. Carrying himself with the arrogance of a guy who's absolutely convinced he was the most valuable person in any room he entered. He stared down at Charlotte, wearing a look he probably mistook for genuine sympathy. "Ma'am," he told her, "we keep a very specific standard here at Hargrove and Pine. I hope you understand." He offered zero explanation. The cruel implication hung clearly in the air. "You and I both know how people watch public injustice unfold right near the doors." Full of quiet pity but completely frozen in place. Wyatt Brooks stood 30 feet away, holding his little girl's hand, silently witnessing the whole ugly exchange. Wyatt was never the type of guy to chase down conflict. At 34, his entire life was built on staying invisible, clocking in on time and dodging drama. Just keeping his head down and doing the hard work without a single complaint. He worked a humble maintenance job at a regular office building right downtown, taking the graveyard shift, which fit him perfectly. He was skilled with his hands, but even better at keeping quiet. Raising a child alone was never his original plan. He started as a devoted husband before becoming a grieving widower. Then he became a man who rebuilt his absolute everything around a 6-year-old girl named Ella. She had her mother's kind eyes and a sharp instinct for spotting the painful truths that most grown-ups had carefully learned to ignore. Heading to grab a slice of pizza 3 blocks east, little Ella suddenly locked onto the scene at those front doors. Kids recognize heavy silence the way a dog senses a storm rolling in, feeling that shift in the air long before it hits. "Daddy," Ella whispered, giving his rough hand a gentle tug. "Why are they keeping that lady outside?" Wyatt saw it all clearly, the host looking away, the manager's crossed arms, the able-bodied couple walking right past while Charlotte sat stranded in the downpour. He recognized the cruelty the same way you understand a dark bruise. Nobody has to explain the pain, you just know the ugly shape. Wyatt froze there for a second. Delivering big dramatic speeches was definitely not his style. But let's look at what really makes a man. His mother taught him once that the absolute lowest thing any of us could ever do is watch pure injustice unfold and pretend it was completely none of our business. He was only 12 years old when that lesson stuck. He kneeled down right to Ella's height, speaking very softly. "Stay right beside me," she just nodded. Father and daughter marched toward those glass doors. The manager was still guarding the entrance as Wyatt walked up. Charlotte sat frozen in her wheelchair. "You and I are about to see true character tested." When Wyatt spoke, his voice held no heat, just pure, steady dignity. "Excuse me, can you explain what this standard is?" "The one you mentioned." Jason immediately stiffened. "Sir, this is a private matter between our fine dining establishment, and I understand that," Wyatt replied smoothly. "I am just asking you to explain the standard. What does it mean exactly?" Jason's superficial gaze shifted to Ella, then Wyatt. He said nothing. Wyatt simply waited. He wielded silence like a mirror, letting the manager's shallow judgment reflect back at him. Finally, Wyatt asked, "If this woman could stand up right now, if she didn't need a wheelchair, would she be allowed in?" That question landed in the damp air, stripping away the restaurant's polite disguise. Madison, the host, stared guiltily down at her tablet. Jason's jaw tightened. He refused to answer. But that half-second of silence told us everything we needed to know about his core values. Around them, the gathering crowd of onlookers fell completely silent. Charlotte, ignored until now, finally looked up directly at Wyatt. He did not look back at her. He kept his calm focus on Jason, defending a stranger with quiet, unwavering respect. No challenge, no provocation, just demanding basic decency. Ella stood holding his hand, studying the adults with the intense seriousness of a kid who senses when someone's basic dignity is being challenged. Even if she couldn't name the prejudice happening here. Somewhere in the dining room, silver clinked against china. The ordinary sounds of a luxury establishment that had suddenly, in 30 seconds, been forced to show how it truly treats people behind closed doors. After 16 years managing upscale spots, Jason Miller relied heavily on a specific shallow skill. The superficial talent to quickly determine whether an issue would fade quietly or demand a harder response. This situation required pushing the problem outward, avoiding the mirror. "Let's watch this together." He straightened up, speaking with the cold civility of hollow authority. "Sir, I must ask you not to interfere in private matters that don't concern you. If you actually have a reservation, Madison will gladly assist you." He waved at the host's stand like a man dispensing fake conditional generosity. "I do have a reservation," Wyatt noted, "but that is not what I asked." His tone stayed absolutely level. "True character doesn't need to shout. I asked you to explain your standard." Jason's eyes darted toward the cell phones recording the scene. A lesser man would have faked an apology right then. But Jason, blinded by years of thinking a fancy suit made him superior, refused to bend. He declared with cold, unyielding finality, "Our policy is our policy. If you disagree with our standards, you are welcome elsewhere." Ella's small hand tightened around Wyatt's fingers. He felt the firm pressure. He glanced down. Her young face held zero fear. It was something deeper. She was learning true integrity. You and I watch his daughter focus completely on her puzzle. Her attention total. Wyatt turned to the luxury restaurant manager, stating calmly, "This woman called ahead. She booked a table. She showed up right on time. Is her booking in your system or not?" It was a basic question of human decency that nobody could dodge. The hostess nervously gripped her tablet. "I cannot share that," Jason started. "So it might be there," Wyatt cut in. Wyatt wasn't yelling. He simply pointed out a clear truth. It might be there, yet she still waits out in the rain. The crowd grew. Diners stepped outside, joining strangers who paused on the wet sidewalk. Jason felt his superficial authority crumbling in real time. He defensively crossed his arms. "I won't debate our policies." "I am not debating," Wyatt told the manager. "I am just standing right here." And he truly was, just a father in the rain standing up for a stranger. He totally refused to yield to the social rules that usually force discrimination like this back into quiet shame. That quiet, stubborn refusal to look away became its own kind of human force. Jason glared at him with the intense anger of a powerful guy desperate to snap back but completely unable to find an excuse. Charlotte watched Wyatt in her wheelchair, her own face slowly shifting away from blank defense into an emotion much harder to name. Society usually viewed her struggles through a lens of deep pity or awkward discomfort. She rarely met an unbroken gaze. Wyatt Brooks showed her absolutely none of that fake sympathy. He was just solidly there. He simply refused to let her dignity slip away the way disabled guests are often ignored. Swallowed up by a bustling city that was incredibly good at looking the other way. In her corporate career, Charlotte had hired and fired hundreds of different employees. Let's pause here. Because she knew with the sharp instincts of a leader that she was looking at a truly decent human being. The gathering crowd out on the wet sidewalk grew large enough that it spilled out into the busy road. A woman standing near the back whispered softly to the man beside her. Jason scanned the judgmental faces, finally feeling his fake prestige crack for the first time. The freezing panic of a manager, realizing he could no longer spin his poor treatment of a guest into something acceptable. It was another paying patron, not staff or management, who stepped up and entirely changed how this evening would play out. A sharp-dressed man in his 60s with neat silver hair, wearing a sharp suit that clearly proved he had dined at this exclusive restaurant long enough for the entire staff to know his name. He stepped forward with the calm, quiet authority of a man who had long ago stopped needing to fake true confidence. He locked eyes with Jason and stated, "I stood near the host desk when she called. She has a booked table. I heard the confirmation myself." Jason's arrogant expression didn't totally break. It subtly shifted, the tiny nervous twitch of a manager trying to hide his own guilt. He stared at the wealthy regular, then at Madison. She was already staring down at her screen. The heavy silence exposing his true character lasted 6 seconds. And in those 6 seconds, the true character of everyone there was exposed. Madison's face twisted in undeniable panic. She glanced up at Jason, failing entirely to keep her panicked whisper private. "It is right here. See Vaughn's 8 p.m. VIP flag, VIP, tiny letters on her screen, but they hung heavily in the air. Jason stared at Charlotte. She just sat there in silence. The cold rain kept falling. Wyatt stood perfectly still, just watching it unfold. He already sensed the deep injustice here, knowing in his gut that her VIP restaurant reservation was real. He wasn't the least bit surprised. What faintly shocked him was feeling absolutely zero satisfaction at finally being proven right. He just felt exhausted. We all know that heavy feeling. When pure discrimination happens right in front of you anyway. Jason stood taller. His instinct was to protect the luxury restaurant's image. Just contain, redirect, and manage. "There seems to be a glitch in our system," the manager lied. "We are truly sorry for the trouble. Please, come inside right now." Charlotte held her ground. She looked at the manager, but not with simple anger. Raw anger would have been much easier. Her face showed something far quieter, a profound dignity that was hard to swallow. Pure, clear-eyed, and piercing disappointment. "That table was ready 20 minutes ago," she pointed out. "Your booking system did not change. What changed?" The restaurant manager had absolutely no answer. Because you cannot justify treating someone poorly when their appearance is the only reason. The man in the sharp suit stared down. Madison glued her eyes to her tablet, hiding from the awful truth. The gathered crowd had heard enough to realize this woman was denied service. Even the bystanders who had just walked up moments ago. Wyatt remained standing in the exact same spot as before. He had not uttered a single word for several minutes. He didn't have to. The ugly truth had revealed itself without him. You and I know that is usually how the truth works eventually. Little Ella had been watching the disabled woman for a while. Kids evaluate human worth totally differently than grown-ups do. They feel first, carefully observe everyone, and then ask. She felt the cruel injustice of this restaurant refusal before she could name it. She noticed Charlotte's quiet grace, holding her head high in that wheelchair without breaking. That tight jawline showed even a 6-year-old what true, unyielding human resilience looks like. And now she finally spoke up, stepping bravely forward. Tugging gently against her father's hand, the little girl looked right up at Charlotte. "Do you want to come and eat with us?" Ella asked. Her tone was pure and simple. A child who hasn't learned that showing kindness to strangers should be a calculated choice. "We are getting pizza right now. You can come if you want." We can all learn from that. Her pure offer sucked the air out entirely. Jason was left speechless. Madison had absolutely nothing to say. "You and I know worth isn't external." The silver-haired man watched Ella, suddenly remembering a truth about basic humanity that people often forget. Charlotte, ignored in her chair, studied the child. The little girl shared her father's quietness. They shared that rare trait of simply existing, without needing to perform for strangers. Charlotte was used to commanding elite corporate boardrooms. She had personally negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions. But she had also endured silent hospital rooms after the crash, fighting to find her voice when her whole life changed. She was incredibly tough, yet Ella's face lacked the shallow pity everyone else showed her, holding zero hidden motives. Just the pure grace of one person reaching toward another, without any judgment. That simple kindness pierced the stoic armor she had worn all night, touching something profound. She smiled back, not the guarded polite mask she reserved for ruthless business executives, but a genuinely real one. A small, quiet warmth that surfaces before you can hide behind your public defenses. "That is very kind of you," Charlotte replied. Ella simply nodded, looking perfectly content, like someone who had offered respect and was ready to keep going. Wyatt watched the woman in the chair, with an expression hard to decipher, though not at all guarded. His features simply lacked the shallow, fake sympathy most people showed toward disabled strangers in public spaces. "You really don't have to," he told Charlotte. "She means well, but no pressure either way." It was the rare kind of grace only a very specific sort of person would offer someone else. Someone who knew that offering help without respecting strangers' independence was its own quiet form of pity. Charlotte held his steady gaze. She had judged Wyatt's character in their first 60 seconds together, and her initial read never wavered once. A genuinely good man, regardless of outward appearances. Real decency is tragically rare. "I deeply appreciate the invitation," she told him honestly. She meant it for the basic human respect, far more than the food. She was going to say more, but her phone, tucked inside her wheelchair pocket, suddenly began to buzz. It was her assistant, Marcus. A man told to interrupt her evening only for absolute, time-sensitive corporate emergencies. Her driver had radioed him while circling the block, noticing a very telling detail outside the restaurant. A luxury company vehicle parked down at the far end of the avenue. Registered to the hospitality group's senior executives, the heavy hitters. Charlotte paused, absorbing the new reality. "Tell him to pull up front," she said. "Right now is perfectly fine." Watch closely now. Manager Jason Miller received an urgent call at 7:59. Just 1 minute before Charlotte's table reservation was meant to start. The panicked conversation on the line lasted under 90 seconds. When he stepped back out, all his smugness had vanished. Charlotte saw the shift instantly. She always paid close attention. Meanwhile, the arrogant hostess, Madison, froze completely when a panicked coworker leaned in and whispered a sharp warning. "Corporate auditors are hitting this location tonight. Totally unannounced spot checks." Madison stared at her booking screen, glanced at Jason, then panicked toward the entrance. In luxury dining, audits strip away titles, exposing how people actually treat their most vulnerable guests. Charlotte revealed absolutely nothing. You see, 14 months in a wheelchair taught her to let strangers reveal their true, unfiltered colors first. Today, let's watch young Ella studying the shiny brass letters above the entrance with deep, focused interest, sounding each shiny letter quietly against her lips. Inside the dining room, safely hidden away at a back corner table, Dominic Hale was eating all alone. 51, dressed to impress and sitting there without a reservations simply because he believed he didn't need one. He was deputy director of the Hargrove and Pine group. He sat close to real power rather than actually holding it. This was his daily reality and his absolute deepest source of bitter frustration. Dominic knew perfectly well Charlotte was making unannounced visits to their various locations, but he had no idea she would show up here tonight. He placed his fork down very carefully, then slowly pulled out his phone. His phone call was extremely brief. He called someone he regularly spoke with about what he coldly called the right image for the brand consistency, and what their hidden policies carefully called guest experience optimization. This harsh policy was quietly slipped right into the operating rules of 4 Hargrove and Pine venues over the last 8 months. The boss, Charlotte, didn't write it. That ugly rule came straight from Dominic. And managers like Jason eagerly enforced it because they completely understood, without hearing it out loud, exactly who that cruel policy was excluding. What sat outside the diner tonight wasn't just a random woman in the rain. It was the true test of character Dominic prayed would never arrive. The car rolling up to the curb was dark and quiet, no flashy logos. Just the silent, solid quality of true wealth that never feels the need to brag. The driver opened the back door and a man in a dark vest stepped out. His name was Marcus O'Shea and he moved with the sharp skill of someone whose entire job was fixing things when true character is tested. He completely ignored the staring crowd. His eyes went straight to Charlotte. Then, in a tone barely louder than the rain, he said, "Miss Vance, I have the files you requested." That name finally hit Jason Miller a split second before reality caught up. Miss Vance. The initials on the booking they rejected, C. Vance. He turned his head toward Charlotte with painful slowness. The harsh truth of his blind judgment crossed his face in stages. Each thought worse than the last. Charlotte Vance was the CEO of the Hargrove and Pine group. She took over at 31 and spent an entire year fixing up a massive hospitality portfolio, flipping 12 struggling spots from an $80 million hole into profits that made the board look brilliant. Charlotte didn't even bother to look at him. She took the offered folder from Marcus, opened it smoothly. She scanned the first page with the steady calm of someone who already knew his true colors. Then she raised her eyes, not at Jason, not at the whispering crowd. She examined the grand entrance, the rich plants, the polished brass letters, the warm, glowing light spilling out through the glass, carrying the specific look of a leader seeing a business and knowing how hollow its fake hospitality truly was. It was Wyatt realized as he watched her. You and I know that look, an owner measuring the sad gap between superficial luxury and basic human decency. When her eyes finally met Jason's, she never even needed to raise her voice. "How long has this superficial image policy been enforced here?" she asked calmly. His jaw dropped. He stammered, making a panicked noise that wasn't quite human. Charlotte waited patiently. "How long?" she asked again, not demanding, just correcting his false assumptions. Jason finally muttered 6 months. And then, because the hidden truth was out, there was no way to stop it. 8, maybe 8 months. Charlotte simply nodded, noting the judgment down. The silver-haired man, near the door, breathed out slowly. Little Ella glanced at her dad. "Is that lady the boss?" she asked in a loud whisper, clearly heard by everyone judging the room. Wyatt softly replied, "Something like that." Ella smiled, perfectly satisfied. Charlotte rolled her wheelchair forward, claiming her space inside. Deep inside the very luxury restaurant that bore her name, which had spent 8 long months enforcing a discriminatory rule she never approved. She didn't scan the dining room seeking a triumphant victory. She just sat there, feeling the heavy burden of how many strangers were unfairly judged. Meanwhile, Dominic Hale hadn't even moved from his distant corner table. Charlotte knew he'd wait, reading the room before faking the right attitude to save face. Having hired the man, she knew his superficial instincts completely inside and out. Over in the corner of the dining room, he finally stood. He strode toward her with the fake, leaning composure of someone who decided to act first, hoping to mask his awful treatment of others. "Charlotte," he greeted warmly, "I had no clue you were visiting tonight. Let's find somewhere quiet to sit down." "Dominic," Charlotte stated firmly, never looking his way. He froze, stood completely motionless, then he slowly sank back down. "You and I can see this was the evening's ultimate turning point. Not the big reveal, nor the data. But those 3 calm words spoken by a woman judged in the rain 30 minutes ago, whose genuine authority and human value had never, not once, been diminished by their terrible treatment of her." Charlotte had told Marcus to pull the complete guest logs for every branch enforcing that awful superficial dress code. She spent 6 weeks fearing how guests were treated and 3 weeks proving it true. What truly dragged her out into the storm tonight? Showing up as an everyday person in the rain was the final test. Not just the numbers, but living it. She needed to know exactly how it felt to be judged on the wrong side of that door. Let's look at Dominic's policy. It hid its cruelty behind perfectly clean corporate speak. Guest experience optimization, strict brand consistency standards. Total alignment with our elite premium service. But what that actually meant was that greeting staff at 4 venues were secretly told by managers, leaving zero paper trail, that anyone failing their shallow visual test should be quietly pushed away. Not rejected, just redirected. The words were careful. We know the devastating effect wasn't. Countless strangers had been turned away from restaurants carrying Charlotte Vance's name, all because of a secret policy she never saw or signed. Dominic's cold calculation had been brutally elegant. 3 years as deputy director, and he spent 2 of them scheming for the top job. Charlotte held a deep belief, one that actually cost her ties with powerful board members. True hospitality is never just a luxury. At its very core, it's about human connection. The entire restaurant industry exists because people simply need to eat together, and you and I know a warm welcome matters just as much as the actual food itself. In a way, it actually was the food. Publicly, Dominic never openly disagreed with this view. He just quietly worked around it. He built a discriminatory system Charlotte would despise, hiding it in corporate jargon she'd missed during a busy financial quarter. Then he passed it to stressed managers like Jason, who lacked the time to question it. Charlotte looked up from the files and spotted Wyatt. He stood quietly near the entrance with Ella, exactly where he had been all night. Not showing off his earlier kindness, but simply being present. A thought had been weighing on her since Wyatt first confronted Jason at the door. The truth was incredibly simple. Think about it together. Wyatt did exactly what everyone walking past her in the pouring rain could have done, but selfishly chose to ignore. He didn't step up because she was someone important. He showed respect before knowing her identity. Charlotte faced Jason. "How long have you managed this specific location?" 4 solid years, he told her. "And in those 4 years, did you ever receive clear, written proof of the harsh policy you enforced tonight?" He paused. "No," she jotted a note. "Were you told it came from corporate?" He replied, "I was told it matched our brand direction." Charlotte kept her eyes down as she coldly responded, "Your time with the Hargrove and Pine group ends tonight. You will get the paperwork by morning." Jason froze. Deep down beneath his excuses, he always knew this reckoning was entirely possible. He gave a single nod, grabbed his coat, and vanished. Charlotte then turned toward Madison. This young employee just followed her training, having never been given a reason to question a stranger's true value. "You are suspended pending a review," Charlotte explained, "not fired. You will finish a complete retraining program, and when that's done, you will need to decide if you still want to work for this company. That choice is entirely yours." Madison managed a weak nod and stepped away, her trembling chin betraying the heavy emotion she just couldn't hide. Marcus started reading from the files. 4 locations over 8 months. Hundreds of guests turned away simply because of how they looked or a visible disability, their presumed wealth or their age. Charlotte slowly set the folder down. "Look at this room, the white tablecloths, the soft candlelight." Facing the bottle-lined bar, she spoke to no one in particular, yet to every soul present. There is no policy at Hargrove and Pine that outranks basic human dignity and respect. If one does, it does not survive tonight. She then locked eyes with Dominic across the upscale restaurant. Stay right in the city. My lawyers will reach out to you tomorrow. He grabbed his phone in silence. Finally, Charlotte turned her attention to Wyatt. She had sensed him standing quietly at the edge of the dining room all along. A steady presence of decency in a situation that had been completely stripped of it. Little Ella had sat on the bottom entryway step, quietly tracing unseen shapes on the polished floor with a single finger. She was perfectly self-contained, the way children behave when giving adults space to handle their business. Wyatt simply watched his girl with that raw, unguarded look a parent has when nobody else is looking. Gentle, the face of a man who found love and human kindness incredibly simple. Charlotte rolled toward them. Wyatt glanced up. She paused a few feet away. You did what anyone in here could have done. That is no small thing. In fact, it might be everything. He met her eyes with the direct, pure, uncomplicated respect she now completely associated with him. You would have been perfectly fine, he replied. You didn't need my help. No, she answered, but I was still out in the rain. He held her gaze and a subtle shift crossed his features, not exactly a smile, yet far from empty. He understood her completely. She did not mean she needed a hero to save her. She meant something far deeper and truly human. You and I know being seen, when you are deliberately made invisible, carries immense value, regardless of whether you could have survived completely alone. We would love to host you for dinner tonight, Charlotte offered. Both of you, order whatever you like. It would truly mean a lot. Wyatt glanced at little Ella, who paused her unseen artwork at the word dinner, suddenly giving him her full attention. Ella peered up at Charlotte. Do you guys have pizza? She asked innocently. Charlotte did not laugh. Instead, the tension simply melted from her face like a weary soul who has carried a heavy burden all day and is finally allowed to drop it. I believe our chefs can manage something very close, she replied. Ella weighed this promise with absolute seriousness and nodded. Wyatt scanned the upscale dining room, the very same space that had been 40 minutes ago, completely unwilling to serve a woman in a wheelchair. The entire energy of that luxury restaurant had fundamentally changed. The profound shift that happens when genuine human respect reclaims a broken space. All right, he agreed, a simple response yet absolutely the most perfect answer. Soon the staff seated them at a lovely window table. Just the three of them. Their view overlooked the city street, where that harsh downpour had finally softened into a gentle, floating mist. The warm amber light spilled through the glass, proving to you and me that true dignity makes an ordinary wet sidewalk look absolutely beautiful. Just for a second, pausing deliberately, Ella leaned her face right against the cold glass, sitting back looking completely satisfied, like a scientist proving her grand theory. Charlotte told Marcus to handle the paperwork and leave her alone tonight. He gave that perfect nod, the kind only truly loyal assistants give. No questions asked, slipping away with the files. Around them, the luxury dining room slowly returned to its usual hum. Clinking silverware, quiet chatter, that comforting echo of a fine place functioning exactly as intended. An older man with silver hair walked past them. He stopped, resting a quiet hand on Charlotte's shoulder without uttering a word. She caught his eye and nodded. Nothing else was needed. Wyatt simply ordered a club soda. Ella stared at the menu with absolute focus, treating it like serious business. Reading it for the very first time, wanting everything perfect. Charlotte asked for water. She watched the child sound out hard words with her lips, glancing up now and then to make sure her dad approved. Seeing that innocent focus brought a deep, settling peace to Charlotte's chest. For most of the last 14 months, she had been truly alone. I don't just mean sitting by herself in an empty room, but knowing the isolation of moving through the world in a wheelchair, navigating a society that demanded fairness this luxury restaurant refused to give, feeling the crushing weight of being judged by appearances. You and I know this wasn't her original plan. She never intended to be left waiting outside in the downpour. She hadn't expected the pure decency of a little girl or a stranger stepping up when staff turned her away. Thinking back over the last 90 minutes, she genuinely wondered which moment touched her the deepest. It was probably the little girl's sweet, unprompted offer. That powerful, heartfelt invitation given so freely to a woman freezing in the rain, offering help without judging her worth. Ella had been chewing on a question, and when she finally asked it, it landed with that pure honesty only a child possesses. "Are you really the big boss?" she asked. Charlotte confirmed she owned this restaurant and several others. Ella's eyes went wide. She glanced up at her dad, who gave a quiet, confirming nod. Turning back to Charlotte, she asked, "So you can make things better? Like, for everyone? You can fix how people are treated when they visit?" Charlotte just sat in complete silence. Let's be real, that was the truest thing spoken in this place all night. And that meant a lot, considering how cruel the evening started. It wasn't a complex puzzle kids usually see right to the heart. They asked the very things grown-ups have long abandoned because they accepted that fairness was just too complicated. Charlotte gave the little girl her absolute, undivided respect and attention. "I am working on it," she promised. Ella nodded slowly, the exact way someone accepts a promise but fully intends to see if you actually keep your word. She checked the menu again. "We should all take notes." "Good," the little girl said, offering her innocent verdict with a finality that ignored all status and circumstance. Wyatt caught Charlotte's steady gaze across the table. He said absolutely nothing. "You and I know this quiet space." In that silence hung a mutual respect, something deeper than status, though not quite friendship yet. Just two human beings recognizing each other's inherent dignity, having weathered an unforgettable night and emerged on the other side together. Changed in profound ways they hadn't even begun to measure. The heavy rain finally paused right as their meal arrived. Just beyond the glass, the street glowed clean, washing away the superficial grime of a city that finally stripped down to its honest, bare truth. Ella ate with methodical joy, treated with the basic human decency every child truly deserves. The inclusive kitchen had finally delivered a comforting meal worth savoring. Charlotte ate slowly, scanning her luxury restaurant, mentally preparing for the real human-centered work starting tomorrow. The training sessions, the meetings, rewriting those accessibility rules. Rebuilding trust and dignity after human respect had been carelessly damaged. This was massive, vital work. She didn't pretend otherwise. Over the past 14 months, she learned that defending a stranger's value is deeply necessary work, and the right path is almost never the easy one. They walked out together into the fresh post-rain city air. Marcus stood waiting by the car. Ella walked between Charlotte and her dad for half a block before she quietly slipped her hand right into Charlotte's, showing pure, unjudging trust as if she had always known exactly where that hand belonged, holding on tightly until the corner where their paths split. Charlotte glanced down at that trusting small hand in hers. Words were useless. True character speaks through quiet action, and this tender moment said everything far better than words could. She gripped it gently until the corner, then finally let go. She watched a father and daughter walk away down a street shining with equal light. Bathed in that crisp, honest light following the rain, she simply stayed exactly where she was for a moment, because you and I know that human dignity truly deserves to be witnessed and honored until completely out of sight, learning this past year never to look away from the vulnerable people who mattered.